Welcome to A Voice and Beyond. Today we have a very, very special guest. We have Dr. Kim Nugent. How are you, Dr. Nugent?
I'm doing really well. Very excited to be here this evening.
Likewise, we're going to talk about something that's really going to be quite fascinating for a lot of people, I'm sure. I'm highly interested in the work that you do. Now, you are an innovation leadership coach and master mentor. Now, Dr. Nugent, you've built a leadership career rooted in education, mentoring, and coaching, from hospitality to healthcare to correctional reform. You have a doctorate in education from the University in Houston, and you also have 3 master's degrees. So very, very highly educated. But tell us about your journey that has led you to your purpose.
Well, I think that, if you really think about ultimately my purpose is really correctional reform, but how I got here may seem unusual to people, but I started out in hospitality, which when you really think about it, it comes down to one word, which is service. And then I went into higher education, which I really believe that once you're educated, no one can take that away from you no matter what. So the combination of those two things, plus obviously being in healthcare, kind of came together, and being out on my own and running my business really gave me an opportunity to be known in the leadership space really as a mentorship expert for people to be able to guide their careers wherever they are, whether they're brand new into their first job or they've been working and maybe they're 30 or 40 and they feel like they're not being seen, and maybe they've applied for a promotion and haven't gotten it, and then it has been really disappointing. And so when I think about that, I was very fortunate to have had the door open for me to go into correctional reform, and I don't find any differences. Basically, people really, once they learn new things, to be able to apply them. All the things that I have learned my entire life are 100% transferable into the prisons and the jails that I work in.
So, why is this work so important to you?
Well, I totally believe in second chances. Let's start there. And
Great.
so for sure, this population deserves a second chance. And the obstacles that they're up against, even if everything were great, are so unbelievably high. The barriers are so incredible. And we don't make it easy for people to leave prison and then not return. And so one of the things that I'm very committed to, and there are a lot of amazing programs across, the United States for sure, and I'm sure all over the world, quite frankly, but I think that they tend to be very singular in scope. And what I mean by that is they're focusing on one thing. And I'm focusing on 3 things. I'm focusing on the fact that they can develop their soft skills and their employability skills, number 1. Number 2, we're working on specific behaviors that we want to change over a 6 to 9 month period. And finally, should they be fortunate enough to be released, they have a very robust plan, practical, realistic plan for what it might really look like when they want to reintegrate into society. Plus, there's a very detailed checklist that they can go through. So really, instead of going 3 or 4 different places, inside of my program is everything. So I think that that is a really place for us to really take a look at it, because we continue to build prisons, at least in the United States. So the problem is not going away. It
Mm.
continues to expand. And so we really need effective programs to keep people from returning.
So, this work that you're doing, Dr. Nugent, have you ever felt intimidated or overwhelmed in that prison environment, especially when you first started out? Because I could not even imagine what it's like stepping into that kind of building and that system and being confronted with inmates.
So I'm going to say no, but not for the reason you probably think, is I really feel like the leadership in those facilities have been very generous to me, certainly, as far as, whether it's an escort or something else. When I do get in front of the men who I've never met before, every single time I go into a prison, I've never
Mm.
met them before. And so really establishing that relationship early on. but they want something. They want to learn. They want to grow. They think it's really, they know how special they are to be in these programs and to take advantage of those things. But I will say, the very first time, I'll never forget as long as I live, that when I went through the gates, if you will, not the outside gates, but the inside gates, just like you see on TV. And when that gate closes, there's a particular sound that you will never get out of your head. That's the first thing.
Is that like the sound? Sorry, is that like the sound we hear in the movies? That slamming of the door?
Yeah.
Or the gate?
That is 100% accurate.
Wow.
The second thing I think is really the lighting as well as the noise. And I remember the very first day I was in a prison, I was there 8 hours and I walked out thinking I knew I was going to be leaving at the end of the day. But it does have an effect on you for sure. But as far as the fear factor and those things, no. But I also abide by the rules. I follow every rule that I am supposed to in every single facility, and they're all a little bit different. So again, that really is helpful. But I see them as students, honestly. I don't see them any other way. I don't see them by the number of years they have to serve. I don't see them by the sentence that they've been given or the offense that they committed. I see them as someone wanting to learn. And when you go in with that kind of spirit or heart, it is reciprocal.
With the inmates, there must be a kind of relationship building process that you go through with them. Because I know even working with my students on a day-to-day, that the only way you get results is through that relationship building and earning trust and respect. How do you do that through the work that you do? How do you gain their trust?
Yeah, so you and I are very similar, higher education, obviously. And so I can completely appreciate, first day of school, semester, quarter, whatever system you happen to be on. And when those students come in, there's a variety of ways of doing that. So I'll live in your world for just a minute. So let's say that, when they first come in, you're going to have, I assume, some kind of icebreaker, somehow getting to know you, if you will.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. And so, one thing that's a little bit different, I would say, is that people who are incarcerated have when we take a look at emotional intelligence, for example, there are 4 domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And I bet they score off the charts on social awareness simply for their own safety, right? If we really take a look at that. So they have a very attuned sense of when they meet someone for the very first time, whether or not they can trust them or not. And then that person has to prove it out one way or the other. And so we definitely do an icebreaker. And then they have a lot of opportunities to practice different skill sets, individual activities, reading activities, pair, share, group activities. And my program is really a peer-led mentorship program. I'm teaching them to become mentors. And the reasons that's important is when those men are mentoring small groups, there's so much credibility already built in. They're walking the same path. And yet they've gone through this training, which their mentees have not done. And so again, it gives them a boost in terms of their confidence, their ability to be a mentor in the first place. And what I have found over the years is that through that process, I don't care what group, what facility, these men find their purpose. And there is nothing more rewarding than finding your purpose.
Absolutely. That is the reason why I get up and go to work every day, is because of purpose. I feel that I am in a place of service with my students and I am making an impact in their lives. And as long as I continue to do that and I continue to serve, that is my purpose. And I feel that is when we have purpose, that is the reason to get up every morning. It's to have a reason every day why you need to get out of bed. And it needs to be something greater than ourselves. Now, you've created your From Prison to Possibilities program, and you're essentially working from correction to career with the inmates. Can you break down that work? So from the first moment that you meet somebody to when they complete their time with you, what does that look like?
Great question. So, as I said, we start out with an icebreaker, and it really is a very, it's one of the most effective icebreakers that
Mm.
I've ever used. But basically, it's an opportunity for them to get to know each other, and we ask some deep questions pretty fast, and then at that point, it totally changes the energy in the room. But from there, what we do is that because when I first arrived, they probably have not received their books with the curriculum inside. So they get a copy of that book. And one of the first things I have them do first and foremost is really an individual activity where they get to read about 7 character strengths. They're responding to a number of questions about those character strengths. And then at that point, what we do is I debrief with them in terms of one of the 7, which one had the greatest impact on you. And I do that on purpose because all of them have strengths and we all have opportunities to, really take a look at it and think about from a self-assessment perspective, where am I strong and where do I have opportunities to grow? So that sort of is the beginning of, this journey.
What are those character strengths? I think our listeners would be keen to know what they are.
So you really are testing me off the top of my head.
That's my job.
But things like, I'll say integrity, honesty, forgiveness, those kinds of character strengths,
Right.
responsibility, the things that you would expect. I think that, it really opens up a new conversation. And so when they share with me, what was the one of the 7 that had the biggest impact on you as you were reading and answering those questions, obviously for each person, it is very different. But there are 2 that tend to rise to the top. So the first one is integrity, and as we get further into the A to Z curriculum, and that's where we're going to go next, is that I've actually written 26 different topics in the book that really pertain to these behavioral skills. So attitude, behavior, communication, decision making, and emotional intelligence, so on and so forth, finance, gratitude. I could go
Oh,
on.
wow.
There's
Wow.
26. But so in the curriculum itself there's a page and a half approximately, and then they answer a bunch of questions related to the topic. And as the mentor, once we're in role playing mode, if you will, then they have their own set of questions and they ask the mentees to be able to share their answers and things like that. So, one fun thing, I always say it's fun. So week 3, we're in A for attitude. So week 1 is really character strengths and getting to know each other. And so we have a getting to know you guide and they learn about each other, even though they've been together for years. There are so many things they don't know about each other. And these are more business type questions as opposed to questions just with your friends. From there, we go into a self-assessment. They do a baseline assessment, A to Z, on these topics, as well as they are starting to take a look at the overall curriculum. Now, that homework on week 2 is to go read about attitude, and they have to answer the questions, but I have to tell them a week in advance because there's something special about that homework. And that is, I use a lot of my coaching methodology in the book. And so they have to interview 5 people about their attitude. And I always tell them that can be, it can be a teacher, it can be the chaplain, it could be a warden, it could be a pod mate, it could be any of those people. But if you're really brave, you will call home and you will ask someone in your family about your attitude. And they laugh, but you know as well as I do, family doesn't hold back.
Family does not.
No. So then when they come back the next day and we debrief, was there anything that surprised them specifically? I don't ask them to do call outs. That's not my intention, but it's really what did you learn from going through that experience? The other thing that I teach them, because I was taught this, is that when you ask for feedback, there's only 2 words you say, and that is thank you. So when they're asking for feedback and they say to a family member, can you give me some feedback about my attitude? I'm taking a class as part of my homework assignment. And whatever they say, and they say thank you, I said, I am willing to bet that your family is going to be so surprised by that because they're probably expecting an argument.
I would be surprised if my husband said thank you.
Yeah, friends, boyfriends, it's all like, yes.
Yeah.
They are very truthful, and then they come back. But it's, it's a really good way for them to sort of begin to uncover these blind spots. And that's what it's really designed to do. And we all have blind spots. I'm a coach. We all have blind spots. Coaches have blind spots, so do clients, you know? And so we go through this whole series. And at the very end of the 6 months to 9 months, it sort of depends. It's really designed for about 30 weeks. However, prisons have a lot of lockdowns, meaning legally they have to lock down for at least 3 days, depending on the offense that was actually occurring in the facility. But if we fast forward to the very end, they will have a practical plan, things they've had to think about, you know, where am I going to live? How am I going to get a job? You know, how much money, if any, will I have when I leave? You know, all of those other pieces so that they at least are thinking, rather than if they don't go through a program like this, here's what happens, is they're waiting for that day for release. And if no behavior change has happened, all they're thinking about is, I can't wait to get out of here in freedom. If that's all that they're thinking about, within, I bet, 3 days they'll be back, because that's just not practical. It's just not. And so we always celebrate at the very end. We have a formal graduation, depending on the facility. Sometimes family and friends are invited, sometimes not the point. And then they have a special lunch really to honor them. They get certificates, and the program is, to me, the most touching thing. I love training, and I also love graduation, I'm sure, like you, which is, I like the beginning and I like the end, because these guys, 2 mentors and 2 mentees, typically at a minimum, sometimes more, are part of the curriculum and part of the program to really be able to talk about the impact for themselves as well as the mentees. And I remember them on day one, right? Where they really weren't speaking. It was really terrifying. They're standing in front of people behind a podium and really sharing publicly, you know, about the impact. To see the growth and development is just amazing. And what I really like even more than that is, many times we don't talk in any detail with the staff. Certainly the warden and assistant wardens know. But for the most part, the rest of the staff is doing their job. So they get invited to graduation, and they are so surprised because they remember that guy when, fill in the blank, and now they're seeing the transformation that is happening. So that does so much, I think, really for everyone's morale. And for some of these guys, this is the first completion certificate they've ever received.
What a sense of fulfillment for them.
Yes.
That would give them a sense of achievement. Having completed that program and doing all that work, that is truly transformational. But with these inmates, who is the typical inmate that you work with? And are you privy to information about why they're there or anything about them when you go in to work with them?
So there's no typical inmate. Let's start there. Number 2, I don't ask anything about anything. I'm not there for that reason. I am there to teach. I am there to facilitate. I am there to help them learn how to become a mentor and be a better version of themselves. That is my role. I have no other role. The one thing I think to really do this work, if you're going to be effective, is you have to be with people however they are and however they aren't. And in the beginning, Marissa, I'll tell you, naively, I mean, we thought it was the right thing. The first 2 prisons, we had criteria that said within, say, 1 year, well, say 6 months to 2 years release, and really, you know, minimum or moderate security. And we threw that quickly out the window after the first group because it didn't make a difference. What I've found now is that anyone, there are no barriers to my program. Doesn't matter the offense, doesn't matter if they have a life sentence, doesn't matter. Here's why. Because everyone deserves a second chance, number 1. Number 2, some of the men who are now currently mentors or even coaches inside my program or even facilitating for me, many of them have life sentences. So you might ask yourself, why in the heck would someone want to do this? But I'll tell you what, they found their purpose. And when they can make a difference in somebody else's life, it makes them feel better.
And if they feel better, they are better human beings.
And the thing I'm most proud of, to tell you the truth, is originally, and again, naively, I thought a great metric would be to be able to track completion rate. I mean, that would be something typical, something I was familiar with. But the very first warden early on told me, he said, hey, Kim, that's great. And what we really want to do is we want to track rule violations, meaning if they have a rule violation, that's not okay, right? So it's not a testament to my program. So we've been tracking that for over 3.5 years at this point. And so in one particular state, 2 prisons, we have 498 men who have gone through the program over the last 3.5 years. So that's our group, right?
Wow.
Then we have general population. So general population at both prisons. In one prison, they have 300 a month rule violations. The other have 100 a month rule violations. So keep those two numbers in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been tracking these guys, all of them, the entire period, and a total of 6 total over 3.5 years rule violations in total at both prisons.
That is a massive difference. That
So
is
I'm so
significant.
excited, not for the
Yes.
number, because of the impact of what that means is it's safer for the men and the staff all at the same time. And we are
Yes.
critically understaffed in the US
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to correctional officers. So the safer it can be for those that are working is really the most important factor for everyone to be able to really come to work and enjoy their job, but also treat one another with dignity and respect.
Yes. And not only that, but that is absolutely showing the impact of the work.
Yes.
That the fact that their behavior has changed as a result of the work. That's that, and so significantly
And that's
across the
why I think the
board.
program is so important. So it's not focusing just on reentry, which there are many fantastic programs, please don't get me wrong, out there that do that. But we've got to really work with the whole person. It can't be one thing. We're talking about human beings. And if they can leave with a better version of themselves, their family wins, the community wins, they win.
Do you believe that all inmates have the capacity to reform? And if so, what is the one characteristic or quality do they require as human beings in order for that to happen?
That's so easy for me to answer. They have to want it.
Ah.
You have to be coachable, just like a
Mm-hmm.
coach and a client. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be coachable. You don't want it, we're not here for you.
But what role does remorse have in that? Do they have to be remorseful also about their crime, or is it about letting go of the past and just stepping into, okay, this is the present time and looking forward?
I'm going to answer that question a little bit differently.
Yeah.
My program does have a very strong spiritual foundation, but I believe something else has to happen prior to my program.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think they have to have a spiritual transformation really before things can shift. I believe that very strongly. It's my personal belief, but I have seen time and time again when that happens at whatever point in their incarceration, that's when real development can happen. That's when real change can happen.
So when they believe in something greater than themselves,
Yes.
okay, and they can step out of themselves and into putting their lives and their beliefs into something else.
Yeah, and what I hear consistently when they get to my program, and that is that at some point early on, first of all, because they're doing the work,
Mm.
they're having these conversations at home to begin with. So they're excited to share something they're learning with their
Mm-hmm.
family or whatever. But I don't know technically whether it's really halfway through. It's not really important, but there is a shift that happens, and they have all come back and said, "Hey, Kim, until this, it was me, 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 me." And now I realize I want to reintegrate into my family. It can't be me anymore. I'm actually calling home and I'm interested in what they're saying. I'm getting myself out of the way. I'm asking how they're doing. It's a very different conversation than it used to be. We used to fight all the time and we don't.
So it's very much too a shift in mindset.
Yes, M is for mindset. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yes, it truly is. So what's the biggest revelation that you've had in doing this work about even something that has made you rethink the way you go about coaching outside of that system, or just about people in general?
I have two responses to that. The first is as far as the work is concerned, I loved teaching when I was in higher ed, just loved
Mhm.
it. Still consider myself a teacher. But this particular group, the work that I had the really honor and privileged to do, and I really do look at it that way, is that I feel that it's the most rewarding work I've ever done because of what they teach me. Number two, but going back to, so when I leave, right? So I'm doing this and I leave and I go back into corporate America. And when I listen to conversations about people, it doesn't matter if it's a manager, an employee, two employees, two manager, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what level of executive either. And there's conflict. I'll say it that way. Conflict, discontent, just not in a really positive space or whatever. And I take all that in and think about if they really knew what a problem was, they would
Mm,
not continue down this journey. Because
mm.
honestly, they give me such a sense of, whatever I think is a problem is so minuscule in comparison to what they're having to navigate every single day. So for me, it's such a great reminder of how grateful I am for the life that I have and the people I have in my community and the things I get to do. And I do not take that for granted.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I think to myself sometimes when people express a problem is, oh my gosh, first world problem. That's it truly is. People can dramatize, they can put themselves into such a victim mentality that they forget about all the great things that they have in their lives. And I feel that so many of us live a life of privilege.
Absolutely. And even if we don't have a lot, we still live a life of privilege in comparison.
100%. 100%. I truly believe that. Now, with these inmates, with those who are reformed and the ones who are leaving that facility, do you help them obtain employment?
I don't. So, that's sort of where the services end.
Mhm.
However, I do hope soon that to be able to partner with a couple of organizations. Now, remember, people are all over the United States and where they're going to go back. Wherever they are incarcerated doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're going to stay. It's a little more complicated. Now, do we help as far as different organizations out there that will hire second chance? Absolutely. They get that list and things like that. There's also a really great website or employer today that's out there. It's called honestjobs.com. I know nothing about them other than know that they have vetted
Mhm.
all of their employers as second chance employers. And so that is my first go-to recommendation for anybody who's getting out, is to go to honestjobs.com, because
Mm.
it's not the same thing as maybe you and I going to look online to find employment, because we're not having to navigate the same thing. So that is definitely one thing. I do believe that there are many, many organizations out there that can assist in this arena, whatever the need happens to be. The problem is that really the guys really need a helping hand. And I don't mean it like, so if I gave you a list, that's great, but you really almost need someone to take you by the hand to show up and
Mm.
figure all that out, because it's so frustrating. And the hours, and then, and then they close for lunch, or they close at 5, or the long lines, or whatever that is. And you have to have transportation to go there. And then it costs money for that. And just simple things you might think, hey, it wouldn't be that hard. Imagine that you were going to be released. You have $100 total. Where are you going to live? How are you going to get there? You don't have a cell phone. Oh, by the way, you don't have an email address. And so it goes on and on and on and on. And so you have to be 10 times more resilient to
Mm.
be able to make it, as opposed to just being on the inside. I think two things though, when you were asking about what have I learned, the other thing I have learned is that I have met men in prison who are less imprisoned by those four walls than some people living outside those four walls are so imprisoned in their own mind that they're so stuck.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
when we think about mindset for all of us, I mean, whether you take a look at Carol Dweck, as far as growth and fixed mindset, or you take a look at Mary Morrissey and constrictive thinking and expansive thinking, or Dr. Marilee Adams with judger mindset or learner mindset, all a variation, all different and all excellent, really ways to reframe, who am I being in this moment? Am I being a no, or am I being a yes?
Mm.
And what's keeping me from being a yes?
Mm.
Because honestly, life can be so much more satisfying when we're at least curious about the possibilities.
When you were talking about these inmates leaving the correctional facility and them having to navigate life on the outside and all those obstacles that they have to deal with. I couldn't even imagine what that would be like for them, because for some of them, there would be a sense of safety being in that facility where everything is structured. They don't have to make decisions. They don't have to navigate life. Everything is pretty much predetermined for them as to when they're going to eat, where they're going to eat. And then to be set outside, and as you said, things like no email address, no phone, really some of them not even knowing how they're going to get home. I can see why a lot of them would end up back inside.
Yeah,
because
absolutely, for sure.
because that not only are they unsure of the world, and the world is changing constantly, especially at the moment. Even simple things, social media, AI, it has changed so dramatically that it would be such a scary place for these inmates.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is depending on how long they've been in, I've heard different stories from people, not necessarily people that I have been training or anything else, but outside of that. And so I think we cannot totally appreciate how much things have changed, as you say. And the reason I say that is I heard a story where this person had been in like 30 years. And so when they did have family, they picked them up and then they had to stop and get gas. And so the person got out of their vehicle and went to pump their own gas. Well, that was something they didn't know how to do, because in those days somebody pumped your gas. Then they go to the grocery store and you're self-checking, like, how do you do
Yes.
that?
Yes.
An ATM machine, what is that? Like, I don't understand how an ATM machine works. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but a cell
Oh,
phone, like, I don't even know how to work a cell phone. Even if I had a cell phone, I wouldn't know how to work. I mean, all of those things, to think about that. And now on top of that, so N for us, so M is for mindset, but N is for new media literacy. It's kind of a lot. But the reason I wanted to put it in there was specifically around all the things that have changed as a result of being in prison for at least 10 to 15 years. And I sort of list some of those things out. But AI is moving so fast
yes.
that even, I mean, I don't want to say I can't keep up with it, but it's every single day keeping up with it so that I can continue to stay on top of what I'm doing. But it's a lot. It's just
It
a
is.
lot.
It is. And I think as you age or mature in life, they're the things that if you don't keep up with those things, you're going to age a lot quicker. If you can't keep up with society, that will age you even further. And for these poor inmates, I mean, that's huge. And I do have empathy in that regards for stepping into a society that has so quickly evolved and changed, and not all for the better either. That would be massive. But do you have one particular story about an inmate that either keeps you up at night where you still think about this person, or perhaps something great that has happened through this work? One particular case study.
Sure. So actually the very first group of mentors that I trained, one of the gentlemen has been released. He's been out 2 years now. And when he had been out for about 30 days, he contacted me. My email address is all over the book. And certainly I welcome that. And so he just said, "Hey, Kim, this is really hard." And I said, "I know." And so I asked him a bunch of questions about, have you read the book? He's had 2 times. Have you done this? He's done everything, that you could possibly think of. And things just were not coming together for him. And now you can't hear his voice right now. I'm just telling you. But I said,
Yes.
if you keep the attitude that you have with me on the phone, something good will happen. It was the most, in spite of everything, he had the best positive attitude you could have. And so I hung up the phone and he was able to get an electrician apprentice position within 24 hours of our call. And that had
Amazing.
to do because of his brother. He was networking, right? And so he did that piece. So networking is really critical for you to be able to find employment. Let's fast forward. I'm not going to go into all the other details. We talk at a minimum every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, or sometimes every couple days. But to me, he's the most inspiring person that I think I've ever met because he had a goal, he had a dream. His dream was to get his CDL license and become a CDL driver. What I didn't know at the time, I have learned a lot more since, but you have to have a good driving record for a year. We spent in prison, that's not
Mm,
possible.
mm.
But that didn't deter him. So he kept working, what happened next, what happened next. And then eventually he was able through his church to, they said they would fund the training and the tuition for taking the license. He passed it. He's driving every single day, which I'm really proud of. He wants to open a nonprofit called White Shirts for Black Men, but he
Oh,
inspires me. And so it's a little, there are many rules that in prisons that are tricky, but in his particular state, if you've been out 18 months, you can come back in some capacity. So we invited him back to be the graduation speaker at the last graduation in May. And the guys, obviously, they're in for a long time. And so they recognized him, but they were able to see somebody can make it.
mm.
And that was so great. And for him, he really does want to start speaking because he definitely has a story to tell. And I know with youth, he can make such a tremendous difference in his town for sure, if not beyond that. And so for him, it gave him the opportunity to be able to share from the heart, real talk for real talk in
Mm.
terms of what it's really going to be like. And, I thought that was just amazing.
That's so cool. And I hear the joy in your voice when you're sharing that story. And I'm sure there must be so many other cases and other inmates that you've dealt with over the years that bring you that same joy, and how gratifying for you. Now, we're going to move on to some of your other coaching work that you do, because you were voted the Innovation Leadership Coach of the Decade, which sounds powerful, and I know you are. But what personal challenges or inner doubts have you had to overcome on the way to that recognition?
I don't know, I'm sure we all have doubts. Let's start there,
Mm,
to be truthful. So here's where a doubt comes in, not about coaching, but I'll come back to coaching, is in the very beginning, and sometimes it'll still pop up because we're all human beings. We have these
yes.
little voices,
Oh, we sure
like,
are.
and it's, the thing that comes up is who do I think I am that I can make a difference in prison reform? And then I come
Brilliant.
back to, if not me, who will it be?
Mm.
And then I'm like, that just re-inspires me again to work harder and more to be able to make this impact because I've already proven in 3 states that we can do this. And so for me, that's a big deal. But going back to the coaching piece of it, I think in the early days of coaching, and this is good for any coach that's kind of starting out, is that I think we all think we have to have the answer. There isn't an answer. The client knows the answer. What we need to do is to work with the client to ask really powerful questions for that client to draw upon what they know intuitively and intellectually to be able to solve that problem. And so what I've learned over time is really listening to what that client is saying is the key to success.
That is so profound. And I have a little confession to make here. Every morning, I fill out a gratitude journal, but I also put in there my intentions for the day. And my top one is always listen better, especially on a teaching day. It's listen to my students, because so often we get in the way of other people's progress when we don't listen. Because if you listen, they are actually telling you all the information you need to know in order to help them.
Right.
Mm.
Absolutely. I definitely had a mentor a couple weeks ago ask me for a resource, and I thought I understood the request because I'm able to obviously do a lot of research and then send it back to the warden, and then they can distribute whatever because they don't have all the resources they need, and it's the least I can do. And so he asked what he asked for, and I repeated back. So what I heard you say is wasn't even close to right for me. I misinterpreted. And thank goodness I went back and kind of clarified that to find out what he was really asking for. Once he did, I went, oh, okay. And thank goodness because I would have delivered something that would not have been helpful to him.
Mm. Yes. So you definitely lead with purpose. I mean, I can hear it in your voice. I can see it in the way that you hold yourself. And how much of that takes courage and strength?
I think when you find, and this is true for all of us, and I hope that everyone listening finds their purpose if they haven't already found it. But once you find it, it almost feels like effortless.
Mm,
It's just a joy to wake up in the morning and it's not definitely not work. It's just pure joy. And that doesn't mean it's not effort, but in terms of all that other stuff kind of goes away. And even the hours go away. I don't think about hours. I don't think about anything else. I just think about pure joy. And I will say early on, this is where I think that sometimes, everybody comes at the world differently for sure. I was
for
very
sure.
fortunate in early age to know what I wanted to do, and that was in hospitality. And so when you come from a service background, everything is service. Doesn't matter what the field is, what the industry is, or anything else.
Hmm.
I would challenge people listening that if they haven't found their purpose or they don't have joy or they're just going to work to collect a paycheck, do some self-reflection. And I know it could be scary and think about, oh my gosh, I can't at this age or I can't do that. The only thing that's really stopping you is your mindset, and to be able to think about what if I could? What would that look like? And then life gets fun super fast. It doesn't mean you're going to go quit your job or anything, but at least entertain that thought and then think about more. And then every day, just like your gratitude journal, revisit that. What would my life look like if I could do anything? What would it
Hmm.
be?
Hmm.
And it would
See,
be amazing.
yeah, I won't work in a job that I don't enjoy. I will not do anything that doesn't bring me joy. And I think I've done that pretty much most of my life. 35 years of my life was spent on stage as a professional singer. And I looked at that as service. My job was to entertain people and bring joy to other people's lives. And that's what I've continued to do. And that's what I strive to do every day. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm not serving in some way, there's no joy in it for me either. So I totally understand where you're coming from with all of that. And now you say you succeed because of your beliefs and in spite of them. Can you share a time when a belief may have held you back and how you learned to reframe it?
I think a lot of where this work came from, if I go back, there was a point, I was in college, as a matter of fact, and was given the opportunity to apply for this job. And, my teacher said, hey, I know you'd be a really good fit in this job. And so I go to this, it was a food service company, and I did. And the young woman who was in the job who was moving on, I believe she was getting promoted, if I'm not mistaken. But she made this job sound so overwhelming to me. I'm like, there is no way I could possibly do that. And I didn't go forward. I just said, I can't. My teacher got involved. Her boss got involved. They really said, Kim, we can see you do it. I couldn't see it. And I see that now. I appreciate that now more than I ever did, not necessarily in the moment, but I think there are a lot of people in the world who maybe somebody else sees something in them and they don't see it in themselves and they lack that confidence. If I had known then what I know now, I would have thought if they really believe that about me, I should give it a shot
Hmm.
and try it because
Hmm.
they know something that obviously I'm not seeing right now. And if they believe so strongly, they're going to be there to help mentor me or help me when I fall. And that's the only time where I think about goodness sakes. But since I had the experience firsthand and now I can see it on the other side, I can help people who really lack that confidence be able to pull that confidence out because they do have strengths. And, for a variety of reasons, maybe it was the way they were brought up or their own
Mm.
self-talk or any of those things are keeping them stuck when in fact they could fly.
It's interesting when you can see something in a person, something that's special, something great, and you believe in them more than what they believe in themselves. It can be frustrating, but it can also be very exciting trying to help them untap that and leading them to success in whatever it is that they're wanting to achieve. But what does success mean to you? And what is a myth around success that you would love to bust?
So let's go back for 1 second when you were talking about, when we were both talking about a person who lacked confidence. You said could be rewarding or not, or frustrating. But what I will say is this is where mentorship comes in. For anyone listening, no matter what age you are, if you don't have a mentor, I'd highly invite you to
Mm,
seek one out. They can be so helpful in so many ways if you know what you're asking for. So what are you looking for? What do they have that you aspire to have? And then they can help you, or hire a coach, because again, like I said, we all have blind spots. Either way is, a really powerful way, particularly professionally. I think that if you think about the sports people out there, Tiger Woods, or anyone else, whether it's Michael Jordan, they all had coaches. And so if they were good enough at that, in their fields, and they still had a coach, don't you deserve a coach as well?
mm.
But going back to your question about success, I haven't forgotten. So really success is, I could give you 1,000 examples, but it could be that student in the classroom when the light bulb goes on and you could actually see it. And that's something that can never be taken away. And in any environment, that's where really magic happens. I
Yes.
would say that. It's not the things that I think that people maybe on the outside think is success, or maybe they think I think is success, awards or trophies or any kind of, that is not success. Success is making an impact in someone else's life.
With the work that you do and in your leadership work, in working with the inmates, how much of that leadership work are you leading with love? And how important is love in leadership, do you believe?
What an interesting question and statement. So I don't know if you know this or not. So it's all about love. But, I also, in addition to what I do, I also have a full-time job. I work for Harris Health as the director of talent and organizational development. I only say that to say
Mhm.
that we had a new CEO come in about a little now, about 5+ years ago, 5.5 years ago. And we were working on obviously leadership development, staff development. We were ready to roll out a brand new program. And he wanted it renamed, and he wanted it renamed to Leading with Love. And everything we do in our organization of 12,000 employees, the basis of what we do is leading with love. So it's interesting you said that. I don't think you knew that.
I didn't know that. I was led to that question. So there's some kind of divine intervention happening here.
But the really cool thing about it is we have a whole program around it. Everything we do is that. The other thing is that he does believe that our differentiator in healthcare is really leading with love, whether that's with one another or whether that's with patients. And that is not a slogan for him. That is definitely something he believes to his core. And we've even had people around the United States who were thinking about interviewing or possibly interviewing with our organization, and they had already heard about Leading with Love, and they said, I want to find out more.
To me, that reeks of we care. We actually care.
Absolutely.
Yes. What's the greatest lesson that you've learned about humanity doing the
Mm.
work that you do?
Yeah, I think that as human beings, we're all little judger machines.
Yeah, yes.
And it's automatic. And I don't necessarily think you can turn it off, but you can
Mhm.
definitely switch it.
Mhm.
And what I have learned over the years is, I would definitely say when I was younger, I may have met somebody for the first time and had an instant assumption about this person and be completely wrong. And so what I've learned is the biggest lesson I have is just to get curious about people, because I know at the end of our conversation, you and I will find something in common that we had no idea we had in common when we started.
Mhm. I love that. I love learning about people's stories, not only about what they do, but it's about how did they get there? Why are they there? It's the behind the scenes that I'm always really fascinated with. And that's when you really learn about the person. And everyone has a story to share. And there's always a reason why they're doing the work that they do. But what's your mission and legacy through the work that you're doing?
What I'd really, ultimately what I want to see is in the prisons where I'm is at least a minimum of one person to become me, meaning the facilitator, to be able to make sure that these programs continue to grow and thrive, because I know what it has taken for them to get to that place for sure. And, I guess what I'd really like is for them to say, she made a difference in my life.
I'm sure you have already with so many of these inmates. Dr. Nugent, the work that you're doing is incredible and such valued work. And I love the philosophies behind everything that you're doing, the way that you lead. You're incredible. You're truly an inspiration. And I'm sure our listeners will agree with me there. But coming to the point that you've come to now, and I'm sure when you first shared with people, this is the work that I'm going to do. I'm going to go into prisons and I'm going to be working with inmates. Have you ever cared about what people think about you? Because I think one of the things that stops us from moving forward in life is we care too much about what others think of us. And I'm sure there are many listeners out there who are not taking a step forward in their own lives, in their own careers, or in a relationship, or getting out of a relationship, whatever it is. The thing holding them back is that they care what people think. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't care what people think one way or the other. And I'm very sensitive to the fact, doesn't mean I don't care about people. I don't care what they think about me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I were to listen to all the things in the beginning, like you shouldn't do this and all of that, I wouldn't do what I do, number one. Number two is that I think sometimes people are afraid. I'm very sensitive to the fact this is not for everyone. I get that. Totally. For a variety of reasons, and I totally respect that.
Mm.
But there is something out there for you. If it's not this, then what
Mm.
is it?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to find that.
Mm-hmm.
But you might be surprised by this, and that is when my mom first found out, and I called her and said, hey, I just implemented the program, and she said, your dad would be so proud.
Oh, beautiful. That's so beautiful. That would have been so heartwarming for you. Have you ever felt silenced or unheard, especially as a woman? I mean, especially at the moment, there's a lot of misogyny happening around the world. Have you ever felt as a woman or as a human being that people have shut you down or that they have tried to silence you or you're trying to use your voice in your life and you're being unheard?
No, because I wasn't brought up that way. So I wasn't brought up that there were any obstacles. Just wasn't that was just not a conversation. If the audience, they don't need to do the math. But when I started in the hospitality industry, there were very few, I could probably count on my hand how many female general managers there were. They just didn't exist. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was not a role. That was a man's world.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, in higher education, kind of a mix, but again, not that many female university presidents.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing. So, one of the things that I think is interesting is I've never listened to the conversation that something would keep me from doing something that I want to do. And I want to do something. Now, what have I learned over time is there's a way to say something and be heard and listen to as opposed to just saying something. And I think as we mature, we learn how to navigate that. But I would say in my early years, I know I didn't know that, but
Yes.
I did learn how to
Yes.
really kind of think about, and timing is everything. And I think for young people today, when they say something out loud with something that they generally want and it means a lot to them, and they get a no, what happens sometimes is then they stop, and I don't take a no as a no. A no is just not now. Maybe I didn't say it right. Maybe it
Mm-hmm.
was the wrong time, something else. So I never
Mm-hmm.
take that personally at all. And I think that that's something that for all of us, we need to continue to think about. Do you get frustrated when you get a no? Of course, absolutely. But how do I kind of take a step back and think about what was missing in that conversation that would have made a difference?
Through the work that you've been doing as a mentor, if there's someone out there who feels disempowered, and I'm sure these inmates were all disempowered when you first met them and they felt invisible and they felt overlooked, would you suggest to someone that they step into their power?
Yeah, so they could have a coach or a mentor for sure. I do have a book though, Marissa, for people who are not incarcerated,
Yes.
and it's called Promotion Protocol: Unlock the Secrets to Promotability and Career Success. And I would actually have them start with that. And the reason is because the reason I wrote that book specifically was having served in two industries at that point with 30 plus years. I saw people apply for positions and not get them. And then what happens is they don't, they're excited, right? But They don't know the backstory. They don't know how many candidates. They don't know anything else. All they can see is, I didn't get it. And when I didn't get it, what happens is the mindset goes, these people in their own mind, these people don't get me. They don't value me. It's too political, whatever. And then the behavior follows and it becomes self-fulfilling. So what if we could stop that and start to say, okay, what is it that I need to work on so that for that next time that a promotion or, something job that you really are interested in is available, you're ready.
And we do have an audience of people who are in the performing arts also. And we are very good at self-sabotaging. We are always in our heads, especially as singers. We are always criticizing and analyzing every note that comes out of us. And I think one of the things that you were kind of alluding to was that self-sabotage. And it's also that am I enough? Am I good enough? And we don't value our own self-worth and our abilities and the inner strength that we all can dig deep into at the times that we truly need it. Now, Dr. Nugent, we are going to wind up here. You have been incredible. And there are so many pearls of wisdom throughout our conversation. And it didn't just relate to inmates here, because I think a lot of what you talked about was a metaphor for all of us. It's a philosophy and a mindset for all of us to tap into. We are going to share the links to your books because you have several books. One of there is the one behind us, Prison Possibilities, but you also talk about that promotional protocols. And there are a few other books as well that people can go and have a look at. They can also find links to you and your work, your coaching work. I truly appreciate you and am grateful for the time that you spent with me and my listeners. And I wish you all the very best in the future. And I'm sure we're going to come across one another at some stage.
It was really a privilege to be with you, and I certainly enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nugent. Take care. Thank you again.